Good morning, friends. I'm here on the top of my apartment and I'm enjoying the nice sunny weather in the morning. And I want to continue our studies in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. What can we take away from chapter 9? David Prior has summarized three very important themes on page 158 in his commentary, the BST series commentary. He says, first thing, evangelism with integrity. Paul is trying to convey in his life that he practiced evangelism with integrity. Evangelism was his priority. And that's why he says, does not matter whether I received a salary or not, whether I'm rewarded or not, or whether I'm given all the rights of an apostle. Although I have planted the church at Corinth, they may not take care of me, they may not provide, but compels me to reach out and preach the gospel is not the money, is not the reward, or not the recognition, but the love of God. Love of God compels me. So he was, although a great planter, church planter, David Prior, he says, he did have rights, apostolic rights as a founder of the church at Corinth, which were unique and overriding. Sometimes you and I, if we have such right, we can become arrogant and proud of being the CEO or the leader. But he says he was not enjoying that rights. He would simply want to become an evangelist, a proclaimer of the gospel, preacher of the gospel, because the love of God compels him. And he says, if I do, with simply because of I am being paid, then what is my reward? He wants to have that holy boasting, spiritual boasting. There is a thin line becoming unspiritual boasting and spiritual boasting. He wants to have the spiritual boasting of doing something for the Lord because he owes so much to the Lord, not because he wants more from the Lord. The second thing David Prior says that Paul also conveyed very clearly a relationship with adaptability. He says he had a commitment to somehow relate with people by all means, and he was willing to adapt. And the third thing is personal holiness with single-mindedness. We will discuss next time the third one, the personal holiness with single-mindedness. But let me focus on relationship with adaptability. What does it mean? Look at beginning at verse 19. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19. He says, though I am free, belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. He is willing to adapt himself in order to establish relationship. It is so important that we must win people before we save them. The winning is very important. The connecting, the bridging is very important. And for doing so, he says, to the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law. I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like not having the law. It's so important that we understand the spiritual language of the people we are trying to reach out. Sometimes we impose our spiritual discipline, our spiritual language upon them, and we are not adaptable. We come with a set mind of this is the way, for spiritual laws, and this is the way to go to heaven, this is the way to know God, and this is what I have definition for you. But he says, no, I try to first connect with people where they are. I lower myself, and to their level, I connect in order to win first before I save them. He uses two words very clearly. The word for win is different than word for saving. Verse 19, where he says to win as many as possible. And then verse 22, he says, to the weak I become weak to win the weak. I become all things to all men that by all possible means I might save some. I might save some. Very important word, two words that David Prior has distinguished. He says to the Greek word for win is kerdino, and to save is sozo. And Paul, particularly, he moves from Cardino to Sojo. He says, first, I want to Cardino, I want to win people. And for doing so, I adopt in my relationship. I go at their level. And then I leave the saving, in the Lord's hand so that I might save some. Relationship precedes before we try to proclaim the gospel or win them. I do all these for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Brothers and sisters, as we live in a pluralistic society in our country, surrounded by people with different definition of spirituality, different definition of God and Holy Scripture and spiritual discipline, spiritual life, we need to first of all connect with them at their level, understand their language, and become a friend to them. The friendship is more important than preaching out loud on them our gospel and our spiritual values and our spiritual discipline. Paul was speaking a very important thing here about the adaptability of our relationship with people around us. And he says, I am willing to do so. So, yes, I am free, yet I forgo all my rights of being free. I make myself, for the sake of Christ, because of the love of God compels me, I become everything, all things to all men, so as to win some and so as to save. May God help us to have that kind of a humility, that kind of a passion that Paul had. Paul is giving indeed a timeless challenge to you and me, and he's still speaking to us. May God help us to understand the life of Paul and imitate him as he imitated Christ. Blessings. Bye-bye.